"You witch!" Victor Slade spat, barging into Kiona's tent with fury in his eyes. Kiona shielded her daughter Nizoni as the oil lamp toppled, igniting the edge of the tent. Chaos erupted in the dim light, accusations flying like sparks, threatening to consume their world. Kiona, a 29-year-old Apache healer, bore the weight of tradition and prejudice. Alone since her husband was taken by white ranchers, she raised her daughter Nizoni, teaching her the healing arts in secret. The town branded her a witch, denying her work and threatening to send Nizoni to a boarding school that would strip away her Apache soul. Yet Kiona's resolve burned bright, a flame in the night, vowing to protect her child and her heritage against all odds. The evening was calm in Kiona's small tent, the air filled with the earthy scent of herbs. She sat cross-legged with her daughter Nizoni, teaching her to identify sage leaves by their soft, silvery texture. The oil lamp cast a warm glow, making the tent feel safe and cozy. Suddenly, heavy footsteps thudded outside, breaking the quiet. The tent flap flew open, and Victor Slade stormed in, his face red with anger, followed by 3 grim-looking men. "You've cursed my livestock, witch," he shouted, pointing at Kiona. Nizoni gasped, hiding behind her mother, her eyes wide with fear. Kiona stood quickly, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "I heal people, not curse animals," she said, meeting Slade's glare. He sneered, stepping closer, his presence filling the small space with menace. "Get out of my land, or I'll make sure you regret it," he growled. Kiona's chest tightened, but she held her ground, shielding Nizoni. The tension hung heavy, like a storm about to break, as she faced the man who could destroy everything she loved. Slade's voice grew louder, echoing in the cramped tent. "You're a plague, Kiona," he spat, calling her a wicked witch who brought ruin to his ranch. His men nodded, their eyes cold and threatening, their boots scuffing the dirt floor. He leaned in, his breath hot with rage, and declared, "I'll send that girl of yours to a boarding school where she'll learn to behave." Kiona's heart sank, a sharp pain slicing through her at the thought of losing Nizoni. She stepped forward, blocking her trembling daughter, and said firmly, "I've done nothing wrong. Leave us alone." Slade's laugh was cruel, dripping with scorn, as he dismissed her words. Nizoni clung to Kiona's skirt, her small hands shaking, her soft whimpers barely audible. Kiona felt a wave of despair, knowing Slade's power in the town was nearly absolute. His wealth and influence made him untouchable, and her word as an Apache woman meant little to those who listened to him. Yet, deep inside, a spark of defiance burned. She wouldn't let him take her daughter without a fight, no matter the cost. The air grew thick with tension. As Slade's anger boiled over, he lunged forward, shoving Kiona hard, his rough hands grazing her shoulder. She stumbled, pulling Nizoni close to keep her safe. In the chaos, her arm hit the oil lamp, sending it crashing to the ground. Oil spilled, and flames leaped up, licking the tent's edge with hungry speed. Kiona screamed, "Nizoni, stay back!" as she grabbed a blanket to smother the fire. The blaze roared, smoke stinging her eyes, but she fought it desperately, her hands burning from the heat. Slade backed away, shouting, "She's trying to burn us all!" his voice wild with accusation. Nizoni coughed, clinging to her mother, her face pale with terror. Kiona managed to douse the flames, but part of the tent was charred, the acrid smell choking the air. Slade's men pointed, muttering about arson, their words like knives. Kiona's heart raced, her mind spinning with fear and fury. She knew Slade would twist this accident into a crime, and the truth might not matter in a town that already despised her. Slade stood outside the smoldering tent, his face twisted with triumph. "You've gone too far this time," he bellowed, claiming Kiona had set the fire on purpose. His men spread the lie, their voices loud and accusing, stirring up a crowd that gathered nearby. Kiona held Nizoni tightly, whispering, "It was an accident, my love," though her voice trembled. Slade smirked, his eyes glinting with malice, and shouted for the sheriff, his tone smug and certain. The sheriff arrived quickly, his boots kicking up dust, his face set in a frown as he listened to Slade's story. "Surrender now, Kiona, or it'll be worse," he warned, his hand on his gun. Kiona's stomach churned, the weight of injustice crushing her. She looked at Nijoni's tear-streaked face, feeling a surge of desperation. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their stares cold and judgmental. Kiona knew staying meant losing everything: her freedom, her daughter, her dignity. Her mind raced, searching for a way out, as the sheriff stepped closer, his patience thinning. Kiona's heart pounded as she made her choice. She couldn't let Slade win, couldn't let him tear Nizoni away. "We're leaving," she whispered to her daughter, her voice firm despite the fear clawing at her. Nizoni's eyes widened, but she nodded, trusting her mother completely. Kiona grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with herbs and clothes, her hands shaking but quick. The sheriff's shouts grew louder outside, demanding her surrender. She pulled Nizoni toward the back of the tent, where a loose flap offered escape. They slipped out into the cold desert night, the darkness swallowing them as they ran. Slade's angry voice faded behind them, mixed with the sheriff's orders to pursue. Kiona held Nizoni's hand tightly, her breath ragged, guiding her through the sandy terrain. The stars above offered faint light, but the unknown stretched ahead, vast and terrifying. Kiona's chest ached with guilt for uprooting her daughter, but she pushed forward, driven by a fierce love and a desperate hope for safety. The desert night was cold, the wind biting at Kiona's skin as she led Nizoni through the endless sands. They moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the soft ground. Nizoni's breathing was heavy, her small legs struggling to keep up, but she didn't complain. "Mama, where are we going?" she asked, her voice small and scared. Kiona squeezed her hand, whispering, "Somewhere safe, my love." After hours of walking, Kiona spotted a cluster of rocks and a hidden cave behind thorny bushes. She checked inside, finding it dry and empty, a temporary refuge. She spread a blanket on the ground, urging Nizoni to rest. The girl curled up, her eyes heavy, but a soft cough escaped her lips, worrying Kiona. She sat beside her daughter, stroking her hair, her mind racing with fear for their future. The moonlight slipped through the cave's entrance, casting a pale glow, and Kiona prayed silently, asking her ancestors for strength. Though safe for now, she knew the danger was far from over. Morning light crept into the cave, but it brought no comfort. Kiona woke to find Nizoni burning with fever, her cheeks flushed and her breathing shallow. Panic gripped Kiona's heart as she pressed a hand to her daughter's forehead, feeling the heat. "Mama, I'm so tired," Nizoni murmured, her voice weak. Kiona searched the cave desperately for water, but found only dust and stones. She tried to stay calm, whispering, "I'll fix this, I promise," though doubt gnawed at her. The lack of clean water was taking its toll, and Nizoni's coughs grew worse, each one like a stab to Kiona's soul. She rummaged through her bag, finding a few herbs, but knew they needed more water, medicine, safety. Kiona's eyes stung with tears, but she wiped them away, refusing to let despair win. She wrapped Nizoni in the blanket, kissing her gently, and made a hard choice. "Stay here, my brave girl," she said, her voice breaking. She had to find help, even if it meant leaving her daughter alone in the cold cave. Kiona stepped out into the harsh desert, the moonlight her only guide. The cold air stung her face, but she pushed forward, her heart heavy with worry for Nizoni. She scanned the horizon for any sign of water, a stream, a plant, anything. The wind howled, chilling her bones, but she kept moving, driven by desperation. After what felt like hours, she spotted a small bush with thick roots, a faint hope. She dug with her hands, ignoring the dirt and pain, and found a trickle of murky water trapped in the roots. It wasn't much, but it was something. She filled a small pouch and gathered a few fever-reducing herbs nearby, their familiar scent grounding her. Her legs ached as she hurried back, fear gnawing at her. Would Nizoni be worse? She whispered prayers to her ancestors, begging for her daughter's life. The cave came into view, and Kiona's chest tightened with both hope and dread. She had to believe this small find would be enough to save her daughter, at least for now. Back in the cave, Kiona knelt beside Nizoni, her heart breaking at the sight of her daughter's flushed face. She trickled the murky water into Nizoni's mouth, watching her swallow weakly. "You're so strong," Kiona whispered, crushing the herbs into a paste and spreading it on Nizoni's forehead. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and murmured, "Mama," in a faint voice. Kiona held her close, singing a soft Apache lullaby, the notes trembling with emotion. She told stories of her grandmother's courage, hoping to spark strength in Nizoni. Slowly, the fever eased and Nizoni's breathing steadied, bringing a fragile wave of relief. Kiona's hands shook as she tucked the blanket around her daughter, her mind racing with their next steps. They couldn't stay in the cave forever. Slade's men might find them. She resolved to seek out the nearest Apache community, knowing they needed more than just water and herbs. As dawn broke, Kiona kissed Nizoni's forehead, whispering, "We'll find our people," her voice filled with quiet determination. Kiona carried Nizoni through the desert, the girl's weight heavy in her tired arms. The sun was rising, warming the sand underfoot, but Kiona's worry kept her moving. Nizoni's fever had lessened, but she was still weak, her head resting limply on Kiona's shoulder. After hours of walking, a tall figure appeared ahead, and Kiona tensed, ready to protect her daughter. It was Ghosh, an Apache warrior, his face stern but kind. "Kiona?" he called, recognizing her. She poured out their story, Slade's accusations, the fire, their escape. Ghosh listened, his eyes narrowing at Slade's name. "Come with me," he said, leading them to a hidden Apache camp. The sight of familiar faces and the smell of cooking fires eased Kiona's heart. Nizoni was given clean water and bread, her color slowly returning. Gaucher warned, "Slade's reach is long. You're safe here, but not for long." Kiona nodded, grateful but anxious, knowing their fight was just beginning. She hugged Nizoni tightly, vowing to keep her safe, no matter what came next. The night was dark and heavy, as Kiona slipped away from the Apache camp, leaving Nizoni safe with a trusted elder. Her heart pounded, but she needed answers. She crept toward a faint light in the distance, coming from a tent near Slade's ranch. Hiding behind a thorny bush, she strained to hear voices. Inside, Slade and Vaughn spoke in low, angry tones, their words chilling her blood. "The poison's working. The Apache will leave this land soon," Slade said, his voice smug. Vaughn agreed, mentioning arsenic in the water to force them off mineral-rich land. Kiona's stomach twisted with horror, her hands clenching the dirt. She memorized every word, her mind racing with the weight of their evil plan. As the men laughed, she backed away, her breath shaky, but her resolve firm. She hurried back to the camp, her steps silent but urgent, driven by a burning need to protect her people. The stars above seemed to watch her, and she felt a mix of fear and determination. This secret could destroy everything, but it also gave her a weapon to fight back. Kiona found Gaucher by the campfire, his face stern in the flickering light. She pulled him aside, her voice low and urgent, and told him about Slade and Vaughn's plan to poison the water. "We need to stop them," she said, her eyes fierce. Gauche frowned, crossing his arms, his doubt clear. "That's a big claim, Kiona. It could bring trouble to us all," he warned. She pleaded, explaining the conversation she overheard, her hands gesturing with passion. Nizoni, overhearing, tugged at Gauche's sleeve, her small voice saying, "Mama always tells the truth." Gauche's expression softened, but he shook his head. "We need proof, not just words," he said firmly. Kiona's heart sank, but she nodded, understanding his caution. The camp was quiet, the air thick with tension, as she realized she'd have to act alone. She touched Nizoni's cheek, drawing strength from her daughter's trust, and vowed to find evidence. As Gaucher walked away, Kiona's mind churned with plans, her fear battling a growing courage to face the danger head-on. Under the cover of midnight, Kiona slipped out again, her dark cloak blending with the shadows. The desert was silent, the air cold against her skin. She headed for Slade's camp, her pulse racing with every step. Gosha had refused to help, fearing a fight they couldn't win, so she was on her own. She crouched low, avoiding the glow of lanterns where guards patrolled. Her heart thudded as she reached a storage tent, its canvas flaps swaying slightly. She slipped inside, the smell of dust and oil filling her nose. Her hands trembled as she searched, feeling through crates and sacks, praying for something to prove the poisoning. A guard's cough outside made her freeze, her breath caught in her throat. She pressed against a crate, waiting until the footsteps faded. Kiona's determination pushed her forward, her fingers brushing against something cold and hard to vial. She held it up, squinting in the dim light, her resolve hardening. This was her chance to expose Slade, and she wouldn't let fear stop her. Inside the tent, Kiona's hands moved quickly, her eyes scanning the cluttered shelves. She found a glass vial labeled arsenic, its contents glinting ominously. Her heart leapt. This was the poison. Digging deeper, she uncovered a bundle of letters tied with string, hidden beneath a wooden crate. She untied them, her fingers shaking, and read Vaughn's orders to Slade, detailing the plan to contaminate the water. The words made her blood run cold, confirming the horror she'd overheard. Footsteps approached, heavy and close, and she stuffed the vial and letters into her bag, her pulse pounding. A guard's shadow loomed at the tent's entrance, and Kiona ducked behind a barrel, her body tense. The guard paused, muttering, then moved on, leaving her gasping in relief. She knew she had to get out before dawn. With the evidence secured, she slipped through the flap, the night air sharp against her face. Kiona ran back to the camp, clutching her bag, a mix of fear and triumph surging through her. She had what she needed, but the fight was far from over. Kiona burst into the camp at dawn, her breath ragged from the run. She found Gaucher sharpening a knife by the fire and knelt beside him, spilling out her discovery. "I found this," she said, showing the arsenic vial and letters. Gaucher's eyes narrowed, his fingers tracing the vial's label, but his face stayed hard. "This is dangerous, Kiona. If you're wrong, Slade will crush us," he said, his voice low. Kiona's frustration flared, but she kept her tone steady, explaining the letter's contents. Nozomi ran over, her eyes bright with trust, and said, "Mama's telling the truth, Gauche." His stern look softened, and he sighed, turning the vial in his hand. "If this is real, we're in deep trouble," he admitted, finally meeting Kiona's gaze. She felt a spark of hope, sensing his doubt begin to crack. The camp stirred around them, the morning light creeping in, and Kiona knew she needed more allies. "We have to show the elders," she urged, her voice firm. Gaucher nodded slowly, and Kiona's heart lifted, though fear still lingered. The elders gathered in a circle, their faces lined with worry as Gaucher presented Kiona's evidence. Kiona stood tall, her voice clear despite the knot in her stomach. "Slade's poisoning our water," she said, holding up the vial and letters. An elder, Tarak, scoffed, his brow furrowed. "This could be a trick to stir up trouble," he said, crossing his arms. Kiona's chest tightened, but she pushed forward, recounting the overheard plot in vivid detail. Another elder, a woman with gray braids, leaned forward, curious but cautious. "Why would they do this?" she asked. Kiona explained the land's mineral wealth, her words steady but urgent. Nozomi stepped up, her small voice ringing out, "Mama's trying to save us." The elders exchanged glances, their skepticism wavering. Kiona felt a pang of frustration, knowing time was short. She met Tarak's eyes, pleading silently, her hands clenched. The fire crackled, and the weight of their doubt pressed on her, but she refused to back down, determined to protect her people. Kiona stood before the elders, her heart racing as she opened the vial of arsenic. "Watch this," she said, pouring a drop into a cup of water. The liquid turned a sickly green, and gasps rippled through the group. She read aloud from the letters, Vaughn's cold orders, echoing in the quiet morning. Tarek's frown deepened, but he nodded slowly, his doubt fading. "This is real," he admitted, his voice heavy. Ghosh stepped forward, his tone firm. "We can't ignore this. Not anymore." Kiona's shoulders relaxed slightly, relief mixing with urgency. She urged, "We need to test our water, spread the word." The elders agreed, their faces grim but united. Gaucher offered to lead a group to the river, and Kiona felt a surge of hope. Nizoni squeezed her hand, her eyes shining with pride. The camp buzzed with new energy, but Kiona knew Slade would fight back hard. As the elders dispersed, she whispered a prayer, her resolve strengthening for the battle ahead. Nizoni's voice broke the tense silence at the elders' meeting, her words small but fierce. "Mama's always helped us," she said, recounting how Kiona healed sick children without asking for anything. The elders leaned in, their faces softening at the girl's sincerity. Gaucher watched Nizoni, his stern expression melting, and said, "She's right. Kiona's heart is with us." Kiona's throat tightened with emotion, her hand resting on Nizoni's shoulder. An elder woman nodded, her eyes warm. "You've never led us wrong," she said to Kiona, her voice steady. The group murmured agreement, their trust growing like a gathering storm. Kiona hugged Nizoni tightly, whispering, "Thank you, my brave one." The firelight flickered, casting long shadows, and Kiona felt a wave of gratitude mixed with fear. They were starting to believe her, but the danger was closer than ever. She looked at Gosha, who gave a firm nod, signaling his full support. The camp felt alive with purpose, and Kiona's heart swelled, knowing her daughter's courage had turned the tide. Kiona wrapped Nizoni in a shawl and set out for the town, her steps heavy with worry. Nizoni's fever had returned, a faint flush on her cheeks, and Kiona needed medicine fast. They reached Dr. Ellis's small clinic, the wooden door creaking as they entered. Kiona explained Nizoni's symptoms, her voice tight with fear. Dr. Ellis, a kind-eyed man, examined Nizoni gently, prescribing a powder to ease the fever. As he worked, Kiona leaned in, whispering about the poisoned water and Slade's plan. Dr. Ellis's face paled, his hands pausing. "That's monstrous," he said, his voice low. He promised to test the river water himself, his expression grim but determined. Kiona felt a flicker of hope, grateful for an ally outside the camp. She warned Nizoni to keep their visit secret, and the girl nodded solemnly. As they left, Kiona glanced back at Dr. Ellis, his silhouette bent over his desk, and prayed he could help expose the truth before Slade caught on. Dr. Ellis met Kiona in a quiet grove days later, his face etched with worry. "The water's full of arsenic," he confirmed, handing her a scientific report, its pages heavy with proof. Kiona's heart sank, the reality of the poisoning hitting her hard. "I've suspected Slade for a while," Dr. Ellis admitted, his voice soft but angry. "His men always avoided my questions." Kiona clutched the report, her fingers trembling, feeling the weight of their fight grow heavier. "We need to tell the world," she said, her voice fierce. Dr. Ellis nodded, offering to contact a federal journalist he trusted. Kiona thanked him, her gratitude deep but fear gnawed at her. Slade's spies were everywhere. As they parted, Dr. Ellis warned, "Be careful. They'll come for me if they know." Kiona's stomach twisted, but she forced a nod, her resolve unshaken. She hurried back to the camp, the report hidden under her cloak, her mind racing with plans to expose the truth. The fight was escalating, and she had to move fast. Kiona met Dr. Ellis in an abandoned shed at dusk, the air thick with the smell of old wood and dust. Her heart raced as they huddled over a small lantern, plotting to expose Slade's poisoning scheme. "We need to reach a journalist," Dr. Ellis whispered, his face tense but determined. Kiona nodded, clutching the arsenic vial and letters, her fingers cold with fear. She suggested rallying the Apache community first, to strengthen their case with collective outrage. Dr. Ellis agreed, promising to back her with his medical findings. "This could get dangerous," he warned, his eyes searching hers. Kiona swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their mission, but her resolve burned bright. "We have no choice," she said, her voice steady. They mapped out a plan. Kiona would gather the elders, while Dr. Ellis prepared a report for the press. As they parted, the wind howled outside, matching the storm in Kiona's chest. She thought of Nizhoni, safe at camp, and vowed to protect her daughter's future. The shed shadows seemed to close in, but Kiona stepped into the night, ready to fight. The next day, Kiona learned Dr. Ellis was in trouble. A young boy from the camp ran to her, panting, with news that Ross, Slade's deputy, had been seen near the doctor's clinic. Her stomach twisted as she realized Ross must have spotted their meeting. She hurried to the clinic, her cloak flapping in the wind, and found the door ajar. "Inside, doctor." Ellis was pale, his hands shaking as he hid papers. "Ross saw us," he admitted, his voice low with fear. Kiona's heart sank, guilt flooding her for pulling him into this danger. "He threatened to silence me," Dr. Ellis added, glancing at the window. Kiona clenched her fists, anger mixing with dread. "We need to keep you safe," she said, urging him to hide at the camp. Dr. Ellis hesitated, loyal to his patients, but nodded when Kiona insisted. She led him out the back, her eyes scanning for Ross's men. The town felt like a trap closing around them, and Kiona's pulse raced, knowing they had to act before Ross made good on his threats. Dr. Ellis's situation grew dire that night. Kiona returned to the camp, only to hear from a scout that Ross had ambushed Dr. Ellis on his way to safety. Her heart pounded with fury and fear as the scout described how Ross tied Dr. Ellis up and took him to Slade's ranch. Kiona found Gaucher, her voice trembling as she begged for help. "They'll kill him," she said, her eyes pleading. Gaucher's face hardened, but he agreed, grabbing his knife. They crept to the ranch under moonlight, the air heavy with tension. At the edge of the camp, they saw Dr. Ellis in an old stable, bound and bruised. Ross stood over him, sneering. "Talk or you're done." Dr. Ellis stayed silent, his jaw set despite the blood on his face. Kiona's chest tightened with admiration and dread. She whispered to Gauche, "We move now." They waited for a guard to pass, then slipped closer, their breaths shallow. The stable's creaky door loomed ahead, and Kiona prayed they weren't too late to save their ally. Kiona and Gaucher moved like shadows, their steps silent on the dirt. Kiona's heart thumped as they reached the stable, where Dr. Ellis slumped against a post. She signaled Gauche, who threw a stone to distract the guard, the clatter echoing in the night. As the guard turned, Kiona darted inside, her knife flashing as she cut Dr. Ellis's ropes. "Hurry!" she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. Dr. Ellis staggered to his feet, his face pale but grateful. Gauche burst in, tackling Ross as he lunged at them, the men crashing to the ground. Kiona pulled Dr. Ellis toward the door, her arm around his waist, his weight heavy against her. They stumbled into the darkness, Gaucher following after knocking Ross out. The ranch lights flickered behind them, and Kiona's lungs burned as they ran, the cold air sharp. They reached the forest's edge, collapsing behind a tree. Kiona checked Dr. Ellis's wounds, her hands shaking, relief flooding her. "You're safe now," she said, but the danger felt closer than ever. Back at the camp, Kiona gathered the elders around a roaring fire, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Slade's poisoning our water," she declared, holding up the vial and letters. "Doctor." Ellis, bandaged but resolute, explained the arsenic's deadly effects, his words grim. Gaucher stood beside her, urging, "We must act together." Kiona laid out their plan to expose Slade publicly, her eyes scanning the elders' faces. Some nodded, but others hesitated, fearing Slade's power. "What if they come for us?" an elder asked, his voice shaky. Kiona's chest tightened, but she answered, "We're stronger together." Nizoni watched from the crowd, her small presence giving Kiona courage. The elders debated, their voices rising, until Tarak raised a hand. "Kiona's right. We can't stay silent," he said. The group agreed to rally the community, and Kiona felt a surge of hope, though fear lingered. As the fire crackled, she knew this was their chance to fight back, but the cost could be high. The next evening, Kiona stood before the entire Apache community, her hands steady as she held the arsenic vial. "This is what they're doing to us," she said, pouring a drop into water, watching it turn green. The crowd gasped, their faces a mix of shock and anger. She read from the letters, Vaughn's orders chilling the air, and passed them to Tarek, who confirmed their authenticity. "We need to test our rivers," Kiona urged, her voice rising with passion. Gaucher organized groups to collect water samples, his commands sharp and clear. Nijoni handed out herb packets for testing, her small hands quick, her eyes proud. The community buzzed with determination, their fear turning to resolve. Kiona's heart swelled, seeing their unity. But a knot of worry remained. Slade would hear of this soon. As the crowd dispersed to prepare, she knelt beside Nijoni, whispering, "You're my strength." The firelight danced, and Kiona felt the weight of their fight, but also the power of their shared purpose. The camp was quiet when a scout rushed in, his face pale. "Vaughn knows," he panted, explaining that Ross had seen Kiona's meeting and reported it. Kiona's stomach dropped, her hands clenching as she realized their time was running out. She found Gaucher, who was already sharpening his knife, his jaw tight. "Slade's planning something," he said, his voice grim. The scout overheard Vaughn ordering all poison evidence destroyed, and Slade had sent Ross to track Kiona. Her mind raced, fear mixing with defiance. "We need to move faster," she said, her voice urgent. Gaucher nodded, calling a meeting with the warriors, while Kiona checked on Nijoni, who slept peacefully. The camp felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap. Kiona stood at the edge, staring into the dark desert, her heart heavy with the coming storm. Slade's power loomed large, but she refused to let it crush her people. The fight was about to get harder, and she braced herself for what lay ahead. The attack came at midnight, swift and brutal. Ross led a group of armed men into the camp, their torches setting tents ablaze. Kiona woke to screams, her heart lurching as she grabbed Nijoni and ran. "Stay close," she shouted, pulling her daughter behind a boulder. The air filled with smoke and chaos, people scrambling for safety. Gosh fought back, his knife flashing as he took down two of Ross's men, his face fierce. Kiona's lungs burned, but she threw rocks at the attackers, her arms strong despite her fear. Nizoni clung to her, whispering, "Mama, I'm scared." Kiona's heart ached, but she murmured, "We'll be okay," praying it was true. The camp suffered heavy damage, with several injured lying in the dirt. Kiona's anger surged, her hands shaking as she helped a wounded elder. The attackers retreated as dawn broke, but the devastation left Kiona breathless, her resolve hardening. They had survived, but at a cost, and she knew Slade's next move would be even worse. Kiona rallied the community at sunrise, her voice hoarse but firm. "We can't let them win," she said, as people gathered, their faces bruised but defiant. Gaucher assigned men to wield makeshift weapon sticks, stones, anything they could find. Kiona led women and children to a nearby cave, her heart heavy as she checked each one for injuries. "Stay strong," she told them, her eyes meeting theirs with fierce love. Outside, Gauche and the warriors built barriers, their movements quick and grim. Kiona returned to throw stones at retreating attackers, her aim steady despite her exhaustion. The fight dragged on, but Ross's men finally fled, their numbers thinned. Kiona collapsed beside Nizoni, her body aching, tears mixing with sweat. "We held them off," she whispered, hugging her daughter. The camp was scarred, but their spirit remained unbroken. Kiona looked at the horizon, knowing they had to prepare for more, her determination a fire that refused to die. A figure emerged from the shadows as the camp licked its wounds. Clad in a black cloak, the Silent One moved silently, leaving a jug of clean water near a burned tent. Kiona watched, her breath catching as he doused smoldering flames with steady hands. She approached, her voice soft. "Who are you?" But he only pointed to a hidden spring nearby, its water clear and safe. His eyes, barely visible, held a quiet strength that eased her fear. Before she could ask more, he vanished into the night, leaving only footprints. The community whispered about the guardian, their gratitude mingling with awe. Kiona carried the jug to the injured, her heart lifted by this mysterious aid. Nizoni smiled, saying, "He's helping us, Mama." Kiona nodded, feeling a spark of hope amid the ashes. The Silent One's presence was a reminder they weren't alone, and as she bandaged a child's arm, Kiona vowed to honor this kindness by fighting harder, her spirit renewed for the battles ahead. The dawn was gray and heavy as Kiona stood before the Apache camp, her voice ringing with purpose. She held the arsenic vial high, her hands steady despite the ache in her heart. "We marched to town today," she declared, showing the elders the incriminating letters. Nizoni moved through the crowd, passing out water samples that turned green, proof of the poison. The elders nodded, their faces set with resolve, agreeing to confront Slade and Vaughn at the town hall. Gaucher rallied warriors to guard the march, his command sharp and sure. Dr. Ellis, still bruised from his ordeal, vowed to testify, his eyes fierce with conviction. As Kiona prepared, a folded note slipped under her tent flap, the Silent One's handwriting promising aid. She tucked it close, her chest tight with hope and fear. That night, under a starlit sky, Kiona knelt and prayed to her ancestors, asking for courage. The camp buzzed with nervous energy, and she felt the weight of their trust, her determination burning like a flame. They were ready to face their enemies, no matter the cost. The march began at sunrise, a long line of Apache stretching across the desert, their footsteps steady and banners high. Kiona led, clutching the vial and letters, her jaw tight with resolve. Nizoni walked beside her, her small hand gripping Kiona's, her eyes bright with courage. Townspeople lined the road, some curious, others sneering, their whispers sharp in the morning air. Ross and his men blocked the path, their laughter cruel, but Kiona stepped forward, her voice clear. "Let us pass. We seek justice." Ross smirked, his hand on his gun, and the air grew thick with tension. Dr. Ellis moved beside her, his calm presence easing the crowd's unrest, urging peace. The standoff stretched on, Kiona's heart pounding, but she held Ross's gaze, refusing to back down. Finally, a townsman shouted for them to move, and Ross relented, stepping aside with a scowl. Kiona exhaled, leading her people onward, the town hall looming ahead, a symbol of the fight they were about to wage. At the town hall, a crowd gathered, their faces a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Vaughn stood on the steps, his smile false as he welcomed the Apache, his voice dripping with fake concern. Kiona climbed the steps, her heart racing, and held up the vial, declaring, "Slade and Vaughn are poisoning our water." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some shocked, others doubtful. Slade pushed forward, his face red, shouting, "Lies! She's a witch, spreading falsehoods." Ghosh countered, presenting water test results, his voice firm. The Silent One appeared silently at Kiona's side, slipping her a new documenta ledger of Slade's orders. Kiona's hope surged as she waved it, her voice rising with conviction. Vaughn's eyes narrowed, and he ordered the crowd to disperse, his tone sharp. Kiona stood her ground, feeling the community's strength behind her, their anger growing. The air crackled with tension, and she knew this moment could change everything, but danger was closer than ever. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and the silent one stepped forward, pulling off his black cloak. Scars crisscrossed his arms, and he spoke, his voice low but clear. "I was Slade's chemist. I made the poison." Gasps echoed as he handed Kiona a signed confession, detailing the arsenic's creation. Kiona's heart soared, using his words to bolster her case, reading the ledger aloud. Slade's face paled, his bluster fading, while Vaughn edged toward the hall's door, his calm cracking. Ross raised his gun, shouting, "Enough of this!" And the crowd froze, fear rippling through. Kiona shielded Najoni, her body tense, her eyes locked on Ross. Townspeople shouted at Ross to stop, their voices a rising tide. The silent one moved closer to Kiona, his presence steady, and she felt a surge of courage. Vaughn tried to slip away, but a group of townsfolk blocked him, their faces hard. The confrontation teetered on the edge of violence, and Kiona prayed for strength, knowing they were close to breaking Slade's grip. Chaos erupted as Ross fired a shot, the bullet grazing Gosha's arm, blood staining his sleeve. Kiona screamed, pushing Nizoni behind her as the crowd surged, some Apache tackling Ross's men. Fists flew, and shouts filled the air. The town hall steps a battleground. Dr. Ellis dove at Ross, saving a child from a swinging blade, his face set with determination. Ross snarled, plunging a knife into Dr. Ellis's chest, and Kiona's cry tore through the noise as he fell. She ran to him, cradling his head, tears streaming down her face. The silent one tackled Ross, pinning him down, ending the fight. The crowd fell silent, the weight of Dr. Ellis's sacrifice sinking in. Kiona sobbed, whispering, "Thank you," as his eyes closed, his breath fading. Nizoni clung to her, trembling, and Kiona held her tightly, her heart shattered but her resolve unbroken. The violence stopped, but the pain lingered, a heavy reminder of the cost of their fight. The community gathered that night, their faces etched with grief. Kiona stood by Dr. Ellis's body, wrapped in a blanket, her voice breaking as she spoke of his bravery. Nizoni wept, her small hands clutching Kiona's skirt, her sobs echoing in the quiet. Gosha built a stone memorial, his own eyes wet, placing flowers at its base. "He died for us," Kiona said, her words carrying the weight of their loss. The crowd stood in silence, honoring Dr. Ellis, their heads bowed. The silent one appeared, leaving a bundle of sage on the memorial, his presence a quiet comfort. Kiona's heart ached, but she felt a fire within, fueled by Dr. Ellis's sacrifice. "We'll keep fighting," she vowed, her voice steady despite the tears. The community nodded, their resolve hardening, ready to push forward. As the fire burned low, Kiona held Nizoni close, drawing strength from their shared pain, determined to see justice done in Dr. Ellis's name. Kiona worked through her grief, gathering the vial, letters, and the silent one's confession into a bundle. Gosha helped her write a letter to federal authorities, his hand steady as he penned their plea for justice. A trusted scout volunteered to deliver the package, slipping out under cover of night. Kiona's stomach churned with worry. Slade's men could intercept it, but she pushed the fear aside. Nizoni stayed near, sensing her mother's tension, and asked, "Will they listen, Mama?" Kiona forced a smile, saying, "They have to." The community held a prayer circle, their voices rising in the desert air, asking for truth to prevail. Gosha doubled the camp's patrols, his face grim, expecting trouble. Days later, a reply arrived, promising an investigation, and Kiona's heart lifted, though doubt lingered. She clutched the letter, her fingers tracing the words, and felt Dr. Ellis's spirit urging her on. The fight was far from over, but this was a step toward the justice they deserved. Federal agents rode into town, their badges glinting in the sun, and Kiona met them at the camp's edge, her hands full of evidence. She handed over the vial, letters, and reports, her voice clear as she explained the poisoning. The Silent One joined her, recounting his role in Slade's scheme, his words heavy with regret. The agents, stern but attentive, inspected the contaminated river, their faces grim as the water tested positive for arsenic. Townspeople gathered, whispering as Vaughn and Slade were summoned for questioning. Kiona stood tall, her hope rising, but she feared their influence could sway the agents. Nizoni tugged her sleeve, asking, "Will they be punished?" Kiona squeezed her hand, unsure but determined. "We're fighting for it," she said softly. The agent's questions grew sharper, and Kiona felt a flicker of triumph, sensing the noose tightening around Slade. The camp watched, tense and hopeful, as the investigation unfolded, the truth inching closer to the light. Slade and Vaughn faced the agents in the town square, their faces masks of defiance. Slade claimed the poison was an accident, blaming Klein, his chemist, with a smooth lie. Vaughn played innocent, his voice calm as he denied any knowledge. Mrs. Vaughn stepped forward, her hands trembling, and confessed. They planned it all, her words shattering the silence. The agents searched Slade's office, uncovering more letters linking him to the poison. Kiona stood nearby, refuting Slade's lies with water test results, her voice unwavering. The Silent One revealed Klein's role, producing a signed order from Slade. The crowd turned against Slade, their shouts demanding answers, their trust in him crumbling. Ross, under pressure, admitted his part, implicating both men, his voice shaking. Kiona's heart raced, a mix of relief and tension, as the truth unraveled. The agents took notes, their faces hard, and Kiona felt justice within reach, though she braced for any final tricks from Slade. The investigation deepened as agents raided Slade's ranch, their boots kicking up dust as they searched. They found hidden barrels of arsenic, their labels matching the vial Kiona had taken. Klein was arrested, his head bowed as he confessed to supplying the poison, his voice low with shame. Kiona testified before the agents, her words strong, detailing the sickness that plagued her people. The Silent One handed over a ledger, its pages filled with Slade's orders, each entry a nail in his coffin. Vaughn's allies distanced themselves, their fear of prosecution clear. The Apache community stood behind Kiona, their presence a wall of strength, their voices united. Nijoni watched her mother, her eyes shining with pride, and Kiona drew courage from her daughter's gaze. The agents prepared charges, their movements swift, and Kiona felt a surge of hope, tempered by caution. The ranch, once Slade's fortress, was now a crime scene, and Kiona stood tall knowing they were close to victory, but ready for whatever came next. The town square buzzed with tension as federal agents moved in, their faces grim. Kiona stood among her people, her heart pounding as they cuffed Victor Slade, his face twisted in fury. Vaughn was dragged from his office, shouting protests that fell on deaf ears. Ross, his bravado gone, was led away in chains, his head bowed. Kiona's chest swelled with relief, her breath shaky as the crowd erupted in cheers. Ghosh clapped her shoulder, his voice rough with pride. "You did this, Kiona!" Nijoni threw her arms around her mother, tears of joy streaming down her face, her small body trembling. The Silent One appeared briefly at the crowd's edge, giving Kiona a silent nod before vanishing into the dusk. Kiona's eyes followed him, gratitude warming her heart, but her focus returned to the moment. The Apache community stood tall, their unity a shield against years of oppression. The townspeople watched, some ashamed, others awed, as justice took hold. Kiona felt the weight of their victory, but Dr. Ellis's absence lingered, a quiet ache amid the triumph. The federal courthouse was packed, its wooden benches creaking under the weight of spectators. Kiona took the stand, her voice steady as she described the poisoned water's toll on her people. The Silent One's evidence a ledger, a confessions ad on the table, undeniable proof of Slade's crimes. Slade's lawyer tried to smear Kiona, calling her a troublemaker, but her calm rebuttals silenced him. Vaughn's lies crumbled under sharp questions, his face paling as the truth emerged. Mrs. Vaughn testified, her voice trembling, confirming her husband's role in the scheme. The Apache community filled the back rows, their presence a silent force, their eyes fixed on Kiona with pride. Nizoni sat close, her small hand clutching Kiona's shawl, her gaze fierce with admiration. The air was thick with anticipation, and Kiona felt the weight of every word, knowing this trial could change their future. As she stepped down, Gosha squeezed her arm, whispering, "You spoke for us all." Kiona nodded, her heart full, ready for the verdict that could seal their justice. The judge's gavel fell, and the courtroom held its breath. "Guilty," he declared, condemning Slade to life in prison, his voice firm. Vaughn received decades behind bars, his head sinking in defeat. Klein, for cooperating, got a lighter sentence, while Ross faced years for his violence. Kiona exhaled, a heavy weight lifting from her chest, her eyes stinging with tears. Outside, the Apache community cheered, their voices rising like a wave, joy spreading through the crowd. Nizoni hugged Kiona tightly, her laughter bright, saying, "We won, Mama!" Gosh lifted a fist, his face alight with triumph, while Tarak embraced elders, their smiles wide. Townspeople joined the celebration, some offering apologies, their faces sheepish. Kiona stood among her people, her heart soaring, but Dr. Ellis's memory tempered her joy. She whispered a silent thanks to him, feeling his sacrifice in every cheer. The sun shone brightly, and Kiona knew this victory was theirs, hard-won and precious, a step toward a safer future. The river sparkled under the morning sun, free of poison at last. Kiona oversaw the cleanup, testing water samples with care, her hands steady as the results came back clean. Families gathered at the banks, filling jugs with clear water, their laughter a sweet sound after months of fear. Ghosh led a ceremony, burning sage and giving thanks, his voice deep with reverence. Tarak distributed water to every tent, his steps light with pride. Nizoni mimicked her mother, testing a sample with a grin, her small hands careful. The Silent One's gifts of clean water were remembered, a quiet legend among the people. Kiona knelt by the river, dipping her fingers in the cool flow, her heart at peace. The community's strength shone in their smiles, and she felt a deep gratitude for their resilience. Though the scars of their fight remained, the clean water was a symbol of hope, a promise of better days. Kiona stood, ready to lead her people forward, her spirit lifted by their shared victory. Kiona reopened her healing tent, the familiar scent of herbs calming her soul. She mixed salves and brewed teas, her hands moving with practiced ease, helping the sick. Nizoni worked beside her, learning to crush leaves, her eyes bright with curiosity. The community built a small stone shrine for Dr. Ellis, its surface adorned with flowers. Kiona named a healing herb, Ellis root, whispering his name as she used it. Ghosh visited, his usual sternness softened, saying, "He'd be proud of you." Tarak shared stories of Dr. Ellis's kindness, his voice warm with memory. Kiona taught young women her grandmother's remedies, passing on knowledge with care, her heart full. The tent buzzed with life, and Kiona felt Dr. Ellis's spirit guiding her, his sacrifice, a constant reminder of why she fought. Nizoni looked up, saying, "I want to heal like you, Mama." And Kiona smiled, tears in her eyes, knowing her daughter would carry their legacy forward. The camp thrived, its tent sturdy and fields green with new crops. Kiona planted a communal herb garden, her hands deep in the soil, her laughter mingling with the children's. Tarak trained young warriors, his commands sharp but kind, teaching them to protect their land. Nizoni led kids in picking herbs, her voice cheerful as she showed them sage. The town began trading fairly with the Apache, their wagons bringing goods without scorn. Ghosh spoke at a firelit gathering, his words about unity stirring the crowd, their faces glowing with pride. Kiona watched, her heart swelling at their strength, the Silent One's quiet legacy woven into their spirit. An elder thanked her, saying, "You brought us together," and Kiona blushed, humbled. The camp felt alive, a testament to their resilience, and Kiona knew they could face any challenge. As stars appeared, she sat by the fire, feeling a deep sense of belonging, her people's courage, a light in the darkness. Kiona sat by the river at dusk, the water reflecting a fiery sunset. Nijoni curled up beside her, sharing the quiet moment, her warmth a comfort. Kiona's thoughts drifted to Doctor Ellis and the friends they'd lost, their faces vivid in her mind. A gentle breeze stirred, and she felt their spirits, soft as a whisper. Gaucher joined them, his voice low as he thanked Kiona for her leadership. Tarak arrived, promising to guard their peace, his eyes steady. Kiona smiled, her heart full, feeling whole for the first time in years. "We'll keep fighting," she said softly, her vow to justice unbroken. Nijoni yawned, saying, "You're my hero, Mama," and Kiona's throat tightened with love. The river flowed on, its sound a lullaby, and Kiona knew their journey had forged something unbreakable. She looked at the horizon, her spirit calm, ready for whatever lay ahead, anchored by her daughter and her people. The community gathered under a star-filled sky, their voices rising in Apache songs. Kiona lit a bonfire, its flames dancing high, a symbol of renewal. Nisoni twirled with other children, her laughter bright, her movements joyful. Ghosh spoke of lessons learned, his words heavy with wisdom, urging unity. Tarak led a prayer for the fallen, his voice soft but strong, honoring their memory. Town representatives arrived, offering peace, their hands extended in goodwill. Kiona accepted cautiously, her hope tempered by experience, but she smiled, seeing a chance for harmony. The night ended with shared stories, laughter echoing through the camp, binding them closer. Kiona stood by the fire, watching her people, their faces alight with hope. The stars shone brighter, and she felt a deep peace, knowing they had rebuilt something stronger, a community forged in fire and love, ready to face the future together. Kiona sat with the children under a shady tree, teaching them to identify herbs, her voice gentle. Nijoni listened closely, asking questions, her curiosity endless. Kiona shared tales of their struggle, her words weaving courage into their young hearts. Gosha joined, emphasizing the power of unity, his presence grounding. Tarak arrived, announcing a small schoolhouse he'd built, its walls ready for learning. The Silent One's memory lingered, inspiring Kiona's lessons, his quiet strength, a guiding light. Nizoni stood, declaring, "I'll be a healer like Mama," her voice firm, and Kiona's heart swelled with pride. The children cheered, their hands clapping, eager to learn more. Kiona looked at them, her legacy alive in their eyes, and felt a profound satisfaction. The camp hummed with purpose, and she knew their traditions would endure, carried forward by the next generation, rooted in the resilience they'd fought so hard to preserve. The camp was alive with hope, its people safe and strong, their laughter filling the air. Kiona worked in her healing tent, her hands steady, her heart full as she tended to her community. Slade and Vaughn languished in prison, their poisoning scheme exposed, justice served at last. Dr. Ellis's sacrifice burned bright in Kiona's memory, pushing her to fight for fairness, his memory a beacon. Nizoni grew stronger, learning herbs and courage, her mother's teachings shaping her path. The river ran clear, its water a symbol of their triumph, sustaining life. The Apache stood united, their bond unbreakable, proving courage and sacrifice could defeat any wrong. Kiona looked to the future, her eyes bright with hope, standing by the fire with her people, their voices rising in song. The stars above watched over them, and she felt peace, knowing they had forged a legacy of strength that would endure for generations.